Okay, so good morning and welcome. If you're joining us this morning live, this is the Employer Advisory Forum. This is the first one that we've run this
Look at him.
year with the intention of running this several times a year. We are recording this session, so if you're watching it asynchronously in your own time, thank you for watching. So during the course of the next sort of 60 to 90 minutes, we'll be taking you through the agenda. You get to introduce you to some of the members of the panel that we've got speaking for us today. But we'll also talk a little bit about the purpose of this forum and what it's here to do for employers. So I think we'll move to the agenda so you get an idea of where we're going today. And the first thing is an introduction. So, hi, I'm Kieran McCourt. I'm Head of Client Relations for Apprenticeships here at Alliance Manchester Business School. So I'm hosting this today with fabulous support from my colleague Rosie, who's been behind this initiative. In a minute, I'm going to hand you over to another delightful colleague, Anya, who has joined us recently as our Director of Apprenticeship. So she's going to give you a little bit of a welcome. After that, the main feature is going to be a panel discussion featuring Carol, Helen, and Alison. Now, Carol and Helen both work on our apprenticeship programs, and Alison is here to represent the voice of the employer. So I'll have a few questions for them. We'll do, a few minutes answering questions. If questions come up during that panel discussion, please pop them in the chat, because we will be having a Q&A session immediately after the panel, where if things have come up, bubbled up for you during our discussion, you get your chance to either ask those questions directly on camera or pop them in the chat and we'll ask them for you. So after the Q&A session, we'll have a very brief compliance update. Thankfully, the ASFA, Education Skills Funding Agency, keep us on our toes, and every year they decide to tweak the rules just a little. To keep you informed of that, we don't take it for granted that everybody knows what the changes are. So we've got a brief session from one of my colleagues from the compliance team called Amara. We will be issuing a handout because all things compliance related, you might want to read the fine print. So we'll be producing a handout based on Amara's slides. If questions come in as they come to you, pop them in the chat. More than likely, because of time, we won't be dealing with those questions directly. What we will do is produce a sort of frequently asked questions for you afterwards, including those slides, to talk about the main changes to the funding rules. Thankfully, there aren't too many this year. And then finally, we're going to draw the session together, and actually we're going to ask you what you'd like to hear in the next session. This is about being employer-led. So if there are topics that are bubbling up for you at work, things apprenticeship related, or indeed things work related, we'd like to hear from you because we'd like you to decide the theme for the next session. Okay, so I've talked enough now. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the why we're doing this and what this is for. So as I've alluded to previously, you're really important to us. Apprenticeships are indeed employer-led. We have lots of apprentices and lots of employer clients. And getting that feedback from everybody isn't always straightforward and easy. Myself and my team, Rosie and Avila, we hear a lot from clients, but this is really an opportunity about you to tell us about what's going on in your business. We always have an eye on the curriculum, so we're thinking, how does the curriculum support what you want for your apprentices, but also to create a platform, a space where you can say, actually, this is an issue, and to hear other employers saying, well, that's an issue for me here. And unfortunately, I don't have a massive bag here to my side full of answers. So we're looking for employers to talk to other employers as well. Best practices don't always happen in isolation. Maybe a few of you have got ways of tackling some of these challenges, or you've got a novel way of approaching working with mentors. So this is as much about you talking to each other as it is about us sort of giving information out. So how do you come about an employer-led session? Well, we actually we thought we'd ask you first. So rather than sit here and say this is what we want to tell you, we actually did a small survey with a handful of employers to say if we were putting on a forum, what would that look like for you? What would make you attend that forum? What would you want from that forum? And the survey that Rose is sharing now, and you'll get a copy of these slides so you'll be able to see it in more detail. The survey suggested one of the most important things you wanted from a session like this was indeed to share best practices. The second highest rank was understanding more about the role of the work-based mentor. So this is an issue that seems to sort of bubble up for lots of employers and learners, and also for us. And then the role of the employer. So those are the sort of top three. There are some other things in there about compliance and academic content, and we can come to those during different sessions during the year. But we thought we'd prioritise work-based mentor. because that seemed to be the most important one, and that sharing of best practice. So pleased to say that Alison, and I'll introduce her formally, but she's joining us as an employer to talk about some of the things she's been doing within her trust about how to make things easier and more supportive for mentors. So we didn't arrive at this agenda by accident. We asked a bunch of employers. This is what they told us. We also asked them about format. Would you like to come in person? What does that format look like? And one of the most important things they said was, look, a panel discussion is really important to us. We want to hear from lots of voices, not just academics, not just people like me, but also employers and learners. And the second most important one was networking. Now, we've struggled a little bit with that one because the third thing, the bottom of the list, was breakout rooms. So I'm not sure people love the breakout rooms. So how to facilitate networking outside of these events. So we're going to give that some thought, and maybe if you've got some ideas as to how you'd like to use this forum for learning from other people, or strengthening your network within employers from the University of Manchester, let us know. As I said, we don't have a bag full of answers handy here. So at this point, I think I'm handing over now to my lovely colleague Anya de Berg, who joins us as the Director of Apprenticeships. Anya, over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Kieran and Rosie, for organising this. It's a wonderful and much needed, indeed, initiative that will give us the opportunity to meet and talk about support for the apprentices and how we can both contribute to their success. I apologise. I've noticed that I'm becoming ill, I think, so apologies for my voice. I am truly passionate about apprenticeships. I started my new role at the University of Manchester in May, as Kieran mentioned. Previously, I worked for a different training provider, a different university. This is a new role for the apprenticeship programs. And it was created to enable positive change and to enable us to work closer together, to get more involvement in and tell you more about what we're doing on our side, and also listen to what you're doing, and also to respond to your needs. And I see this role as a crucial role for building our partnership, our relationship. And I've always strived to work closely with employers, and not because of the definition of an apprenticeship, what an apprenticeship is, and because we have to do it by definition, but simply because I truly believe that a good apprenticeship can only be when we both feel supported, when we both, you as employers and we as a training provider, when we both feel responsible for the success of the people we train. And we do what we can, and we do what we, may I be bold, say, we do what we do, and we do it well. But the crucial point here is we wouldn't be able to do it without you. And today is the start of this crucial dialogue in a form of a forum, where we hope that we can tell you what we would like this partnership to look like, where we can of a dialogue of what we can do to help you to get the best out of your people. But we also invited you to this forum because we would like you to have this opportunity to share your experiences with us, but also in your group, not individually, to listen what you're all doing to make your apprentices, to contribute to their success, to support them the best you can. And we have a wonderful panel today with people who are equally passionate about what they're doing. And I just want to say thank you for being here, for making this possible. And I am really looking forward to meeting you more often in any possible form, but I'm also looking forward to this discussion and any further forum, any further possibility to talk and to work together. And that's it from me, Kieran, and I'm looking forward to this forum, as I said, to this discussion.
Thank you, Anya. Really appreciate that. And as a university and a business school, we've been strengthening our team by adding more people, more expertise in all sorts of areas, as tutors, as academic leads, the new director of apprenticeship programs, and the support systems that sit behind that as well. So we now move on to the panel section, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel today. I'm going to ask them, invite them to say a couple of words about themselves. So, Carol, if you're ready, could we start with you? Are you happy to introduce yourself to the group, please?
I certainly am. I'm looking at a photo of my hair was still red then, Kieran. I need to get that updated. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol. I'm a practice-based tutor. I've only been with the university for 19 months now. I joined because I love teaching, working with apprentices. I used to work at level 6. I'm now obviously at the level 7. I was self-employed for 20 years until I joined last February. So I've got lots of different diverse experience, and I see my role really as interpreting the KSBs into individual roles so that they can understand what we're trying to achieve with the KSBs. And that's me.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, Helen, are we okay to move to you for a short introduction?
Yeah, hi, I'm Helen Baxter, and I work on the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, which is the Healthcare Leadership Senior Leadership Apprenticeship, and I am cohort director on 2 of the cohorts for that. So academic lead, and we work closely with the work-based mentors and the tutors. So yeah, about how we do that translation from the academic and the practical, I think is really important. And having been so in a previous life, well, not that previous, but anyway, I'm a physiotherapist and I've worked in healthcare leadership and management roles as well. So so I like to think that I can I understand some of where people are coming from as well. So I hopefully cross that boundary.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen, and thank you for being with us today. And finally, but by no means least, Alison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Alison Walker-Smith. I am the apprenticeship manager at Pennine NHS Foundation Trust, which is a mental health and learning disability trust. It's over 5 boroughs in the Greater Manchester, but we have over 200 different locations with apprenticeships. Obviously, with using University of Manchester for the senior leader masters with the Elizabeth Gaskell Anderson qualification within it.
Thank you, Alison. I think one key takeaway from me is our course titles are incredibly long. Apologies for that. Even I kind of forget some of the words that they're actually included, but it is a good score in Scrabble. Okay, so before we, the next thing it remains for me to do is, Carol, we're going to start with you, if that's okay. I've got a couple of questions pre-prepared for you. And folks, if questions are coming up as Carol's talking or the panel's having the discussion, please pop them in the chat. We will have that Q&A session shortly after. So, Carol, you're a tutor on the PG DIP, Postgraduate Diploma Senior Leader Apprenticeship. That's the non-healthcare version. First question for you. So, tutors and learners work together in partnership very, very closely. But that mentor role, from what you've told me in the past, can offer a really interesting third point of view. You've got the tutor, the learner, and this mentor. In your experience, what does that mentor add from that fresh perspective that you might not otherwise get?
It's fascinating, actually. The first time I saw it happening was like, oh, actually, the work-based mentor isn't just really important, they're crucial. Because what happens is the learner is so busy focusing and doing the unit, doing the assignment, and they're looking at the next unit, they forget to look back and they forget to think, actually, that was a really good piece of work and I did that differently. So what the work-based mentor does, they assist in identifying the progress and development of the apprentice. And regularly in these tripartite meetings, I'll say, well, what about K9? How do you think you're going to meet that? And then they'll, no idea, don't get involved in that. And suddenly the work-based mentor goes, yeah, but do you remember when you did that project, or you did X, Y, Z? And the learner goes, oh yeah. And it's like a light bulb moment, but it's brilliant because then they start to see the benefit, both the work-based mentor and the learner start to see the benefit of the tripartite meetings, because the learners don't often link what they've done to the senior leader apprenticeship. And that's what we're looking for at the endpoint assessment. And it's all well and good, the PG dip is really crucial, obviously, but it's that link to the senior leader apprenticeship. And we'll just continue. I've just done a tutorial this morning, and somebody said, my work-based mentor didn't have a clue what the importance of the KSBs. So that's really my role, to help them to say, look, what about hard to reach KSBs? What can you do as a work-based mentor? That position you have as a work-based mentor gives the learner exposure to all areas of the business that they might not have even considered.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what I'm getting back from that is, I don't mean to oversimplify, but just having that third person there who's set a little bit back almost gives them that distance to take in more of what's going on. The learner's too close to it. You're connected to the learner. Is that a fair kind of point to take away?
Absolutely, because we only get together once every 10 to 12 weeks. So when we start the conversation, I always say, so to the learner, tell us what you've been doing since we last met 3 months ago. And although they'll have shared some of what they've been doing with their work-based mentor, it's only when we start getting into nitty-gritty and I'll say, well, what you talked about K whatever, or you're looking at the B, and then the work-based mentor, we can bring them in and say, well, what difference have you seen? And then that's it, they're off and they're talking about. But those are your engaged work-based mentors. You have to really invest the time to want to understand and be at that meeting and make notes and have those one-to-one discussions with the learner as well to actually map that progress.
Well, that's a really good insight. And actually, it does lead me to a follow-up question, if that's okay, about sort of investment and involvement. And thank you for that. So being a mentor there is a significant investment. There's no doubt about it. You meet with mentors on a regular basis. Stupid question, but what do they tell you that they get out of it? This is a lot of effort for a mentor to show up, to do all these things, understand all of the KSBs and all the other kind of acronyms that we have. What do they get from it?
A lot, if you start to dig beneath it. It's that pride. And I'll give you a funny story. I did my first ever TPRM with a new learner, and their work-based mentor, I said, hi, I'm Carol, told who I was, and it's great to meet you. We did it on Teams. And he said, I feel like I'm on his parents' evening. I'm that. So there's a nice element to it as well. So there is a proud moment when you can see, but the buzz, the reward for the work-based mentor is to see that actual progression, see the development and the confidence. That's the word that comes up a lot. The work-based mentor say, I can't believe how much more confident the learner is. So, and I see that, which is wonderful. From the program immersion day, you'll see people who are really, thank you, Anne. Yeah, sorry, TPRMs, acronyms galore, apologies. But you see, I meet people on the program immersion day and they're quite shy, hiding by the coffee machine. Then you see them on the first workshop and they're a bit more comfortable. You see them on the second workshop and they're straight in and they're chatting to everybody. And even just those softer skills, and that's what a work-based mentor also sees. They can see the real application. One of my learners at the moment is having to delegate to her team, which is not comfortable, but her work-based mentor is awesome because she's encouraging her all the time, pushing her out of her comfort zone, and the work-based mentor is just getting the rewards. The whole team are benefiting, and that's what we need to bring out at the endpoint assessment.
That's nice. You make me want to be a mentor. So thank you. Final question for you for the moment, but feel free to chip in on some others for the panel. But we're dealing with people who are middle managers who want to become senior leaders. Okay, and that's middle managers are often in a very demanding job, time poor, very demanding. To take it to the next level, they're looking for mentors who are probably a bit more senior than them, maybe a bit more experienced. Their time constraints are even more demanding. Now, we know sometimes mentors can't make it to every review.
Yeah.
What advice could you offer to either the learner or the mentor or employer? What steps can you take? Let's say I'm a learner, my mentor hasn't turned up, I'm feeling pretty disappointed about it. What advice could you give to the mentor, the learner, or the employer as to, okay, how do we compensate for that? Can you compensate for that?
I think it's been organised and try not to suppose, not to let normal work overrule the apprenticeship. So, for example, one of my learners who has got a wonderful work-based mentor, we've put every single tripartite review meeting in the diary. We did that from day one. And yes, of course, things happen and those might change, but those people that put them in advance, so we try, you've got 3 diaries to get together. A lot of these are really senior people. My other advice would be, we meet lots of learners who go, oh, my CEO's decided to be my work-based mentor, which is wonderful. And I do have a student who the business owner is her work-based mentor. However, the problem we have is those CEOs, those business owners are ridiculously busy. And it almost feels like the apprentice is second rate. I mean, I'm not being disrespectful, but it's almost like the apprenticeships, it's only a meeting with the practice-based tutor. And we really need to try and get people on board from day one that this is a commitment to the learner. And I've heard learners say to me, well, obviously I'm not as important as running the business, and that's not comfortable. Similarly with the line managers, they might not always be the natural choice, because a line manager has got a whole list of work for that learner to do, so they might not want to expose them to other projects that take them even further away from their day job. It's just things to consider. And I think, Kieran, you and I have talked about it. It's about what's the best fit. Every individual learner is different, but it's that commitment that, and there's no shying away from it. There is a commitment, but you will get the benefit if you can find the time.
No, thank you. No, that's an obvious thing, but being organised and putting the dates in the diary, I guess that shows commitment. And I believe there's flexibility there. Life happens, so you can change appointments. The learner can, the mentor can, but it's that overall commitment to saying, actually, this is investing in the future of our organisation, and ring fencing in that time, almost as if it were like your annual review, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Brilliant. Carol, stick around. Great. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Stick around. I'm sure there's going to be more questions as we go. Next, I'm going to move on to Helen, if that's okay with you, Helen. So, Helen, you deliver a lot of the course material, and you act as a tutor on Anderson. That's one of the things that's different from the standard postgraduate diploma, that pathway. The academic leads are also the tutors. So you stay with the same, is it 16 people? You stay with the same 16 people all the way through.
Yeah.
So we've heard a little bit there from Carol about mentors turning up, not turning up. I'd like to make it a bit more broad. So what does good engagement or commitment? Carol mentioned commitment. What does that look like for you from where you sit? What's a good engagement for a work-based mentor?
Yeah, so it is about time. So I think it's very much about time. So I think there's that knowing that you have to give time for the learner. So, I don't know whether you have regular 4 to 6 weekly or whatever in between the tripartite review meetings that we have with the tutors and work-based mentor and learner. So I think there's something about that, because that, if you turn up for those, then that shows commitment. The challenges sometimes around that might be the line between line manager and work-based mentor. So if your work-based mentor is also your line manager, sometimes you have to make sure, well, you do have to make sure that you boundary, so that you have those boundaries for your day-to-day one-to-ones and your apprenticeship development one-to-ones. So if you're doing them in the same meeting, make sure that you block time out, that it doesn't just drip off the plate at the end. So just being really clear. So that's a sign, is showing that you give the time to that development. There's absolutely something, it was interesting what you were saying, Carol, around where people are in the organisation in relation to the learner. So obviously the work-based mentor needs to be senior to them, but sometimes if they're too senior, they can be too far away from practice. That can be a challenge, because they don't necessarily understand what's happening for the learner in that place. They can be great for opening doors in terms of getting some of that additional experience, but sometimes knowing what's happening in practice for that learner can be difficult. And also, if there are challenges within their line manager relationship, where the line manager might be saying, I'm sorry, you can't have that time. Well, actually, I need to have that time. If the work-based mentor is closer to them, they can help that conversation with the with the line manager. So I think the work-based mentor, about having that relationship with the line manager, or the if they're the line manager, how they manage that, I think that is really important in terms of what a good work-based mentor looks like. And because often, so we're doing interviews at the moment, and people will say, you know, should I go with my line manager or should I go? And I always say it's individual. You need to work out what works best for you, but really understanding that clarity around boundaries, I think, is really important. I think also Carol has mentioned, I feel like I'm just going to repeat everything Carol said, but Carol has also mentioned around knowing what the KSBs are and knowing what they mean. So this morning I was doing a TRM and tripartite review meeting, and one of and the work-based mentor at the moment is with a previous cohort. So he's in the middle of going through portfolio development with the group, with his other learners. And so when one of the, you know, this learner this morning was saying, oh, I'm not sure about, and he was like, you're doing loads of it, don't worry, I can see already. So a bit like, you know, you were saying that whole thing about they can see that bigger picture. So I think the commitment for me is about time, boundaries, and interest in how can they achieve their KSBs and how can I support you in doing that. So I would say those are the main things.
That's really useful advice. I think, I mean, that's my personal judgment, but I love what you're talking about boundaries, that separation of there's tasks that we meet and we talk about, but then we're going to ring fence this time again. This is your time. We're going to talk about you. No, I think that's really, really helpful advice. Hopefully the audience are chiming in with that, with their own questions and their own reflections. What do you think we can do better is another question that springs to mind out of this, you know, because they have such a big impact on outcomes for learners. And we've heard that you know, you and Carol both speak about how passionate they can be, or sometimes how difficult it is for them to engage. We're a provider, you know, it's not all, some of it's on us, some of it's not on us. What do you think we could do better to help them engage?
So I think the earlier the tutor meets with them, the better, I think, to be able to. So Dawn's asked, where's the most accessible place for the mentor to review and get to grips with the KSBs? To be able to have that meeting early, to be able to show them where the skills radar is on your is within your TRM meeting, you know, it's on your Apptem. So that's there. There are other places where we can show you where the KSBs are. So, you know, actually to be able to have those on, and I do think some of it has to be individual, because I know we run webinars for work-based mentors. We also know that they're not particularly well attended. I mean, I can't remember, Maheen, how many turned up for our cohort 3, but it wasn't very many. And so we had we didn't have very many at that. Now, so that means that people, and they may well be watching the videos. I don't know whether they will sit and watch an hour-long work-based mentor webinar. I'm not sure. They might, but I'm not sure that they all will. So I think how we have those individual conversations, thinking about how we can build those individual conversations through the apprenticeship leads within the organisation. So actually, what questions are the apprenticeship leads getting? And I know we're going to talk to Alison soon, but what questions are they getting from them, you know, from the work-based mentors? So I think it is, and that building that individual relationship, I mean, Carol's already mentioned, is really important. So
okay.
And I think that's and absolutely about familiarising yourself with KSBs. Also thinking a little bit around, you know, what's your development plan? So Carol mentioned earlier hard to reach KSBs. So, you know, we know that there are areas where certain roles within an organisation will struggle with. I mean, in particular, thinking about, you know, procurement in NHS organisations, they all have procurement departments. So actually, how are they going to do that? And having those conversations early, and so that the work-based mentor knows the plan. What's the development plan against the KSBs for this learner?
Okay.
So I think, yeah.
Again, not wishing to oversimplify, but the things that are coming out loud and clear are, for me, that sort of early engagement. Almost the relationship between the tutor and learner and work-based mentor is as important as the relationship between the tutor and the learner, the person on the program. Okay, really useful advice. Bit of a left field question. So we've got people graduating the programs, they're going back into the workplace as qualified senior leaders. What would you say? I mean, would you say that graduates of the program as would form part of that ecosystem and become future mentors? What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, so I think, so in particular, Yes, I do think they would become great mentors. I think there is something maybe about consolidating things. So, you know, we might say, no, not to do it immediately, you know, not as soon as you've done your EPA, not necessarily. I mean, there might be situations where that happens, but in general, I might say, actually, you know, give yourself time to settle in. And in particular with our programme with Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, because they're continuing on to do the master's element, they'll be in the midst of doing a healthcare leadership case study. So, you know, it might not be the right time to be taking on extra work around doing that. So I think absolutely they've got the experience, the understanding, they know what to expect for the learners. But I do think there might be something about consolidating, you know, consolidating their position. You know, actually there's something about where they are in the organisation. Even some of them will have had promotions, some of them won't, but having the qualification does give them a different position, doesn't it? So I think there is something about consolidating that. But yes, definitely, I think in the future.
Okay, that's really helpful. I guess, I mean, Anderson in different formats has been around over 10 years. I think there's a lot of alumni out there. So, but I would never have thought of that, kind of giving it space. Give it some space, you know,
Yeah.
bed in, give yourself the breathing space, wait till you've got your master's at least, definitely, and then have the breathing space. And then maybe if you want to give something back to that experience, volunteer as a mentor. That's great. Helen, I could talk to you for longer, particularly because of how close you are to your program, but I need to move on to Alison now, if that's okay. And Alison, there's a theme that's starting to emerge here for me a little bit, and that seems to be around, you know, we give a lot of support to the learners. And I know this has come up in conversations with you before, Alison, is that, you know, we know that learners coming onto an apprenticeship need a lot of support. We know that. We compensate for that. And mentors actually help the learners get ready for their course and through the progress of the course. But who supports the mentors? So, as an employer, what sort of where you sit, and you're an apprenticeship lead at a large trust, what sort of support do mentors need, do you think, to kind of really get in the swing of things?
Yeah, Kieran, we have, I'm not saying we do it 100% accurate all the time, but we do have, initially from onboarding, we have questions that the mentors ask us as the apprenticeship team. So they ask us about things like, and I've wrote down, have they got the adequate qualification that's needed to be a mentor? So we ask them, how long have they been a manager for? On our apprenticeship application form, particularly for this senior leader master's programme. Have they completed any management courses previously? Although it's not a stipulation, because we do go off experience. So we ask them, like I said, how long they've been a manager for. And do they know their own leadership and management style is a really good question that we ask on this particular apprenticeship application form. We also, during our onboarding process, we ask the mentor is asked to send a letter in of support, as you know, and so we go through that with them as well, individually, with that mentor, to make sure that they know what they're signing up to. So we go through things like the roles and the requirements, what they constitute as stretch in regards to Ofsted wording. And we also print off from the IFATE, which is the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So whether you give them or not, we print them off, and we make sure that they are aware that there is a process, and we go through the process of that there is obviously the onboarding, there's the apprenticeship and the support that they need with the time commitment. And then we also talk about that there will be an endpoint assessment, but that we are there as support additionally. So we recognise our role as the apprenticeship team. And when I say team, there's me and another. There's not multiple team members. But yeah, we go through the onboarding letter. The other thing that we do is we, on the expressions of interest form that they do as part of the onboarding for your university, is that they we look at where the background is, so where they're applying from, which service. So we have had particular people that have come from clinical, but we want to offer that as a stretch to our organisation as well. So we've pushed people in non-clinical roles to do this as well. which is one apprentice in the finance team that did it under our workforce and development wider team, and they wanted to do their first assignment in regards to a clinical setting. So we do things like signposting because we're very clinically focused in our apprenticeship team as well. So we offered that signposting, and we put them in touch with a manager that would offer them that for that particular assignment support. And we also signpost, which someone said about procurement, I think it was Helen, we actually signpost to our procurement team, or we signpost some things we can answer, because if they're doing particular dissertations on who's the clinical supervisor's role, depending on what their topic is, we can aid that, we can support that, but we don't know unless obviously we ask them with the mentor, what are they doing the dissertation on? Do they want any additional support? We send out feedback forms bi-monthly to ask for that information. So what one of your questions was, what support do mentors need? Was obviously time, knowing the role, the requirements, what are the knowledge, skills and behaviours, what constitutes us off the job. So we send the has-or leaflet out for that. So, and I can share that if you want. So there is the has-or leaflet, the sharing of ideas and challenges. So we put mentors, or we're trying to put a forum together, not just for this apprenticeship, but for others, of a mentor stroke buddy forum together as like a boot camp. And we're going to be doing that bi-monthly, where the apprentice comes for 2 hours. We've already worked it out. And then the apprentice mentor comes for the last hour. And it's not that they need to come with their apprentice, but they can listen to other apprentices on other apprenticeships. They've asked for coaching top tips before, and we've gone through things and questioning styles. We're study tips. The mentors have asked for if they get asked about career advice, so we send them the career pathways that we've devised. They ask about wellbeing services, particularly if a learner is struggling, so we provide them with support about what we offer internally as a wellbeing, but also to contact the university for what wellbeing services you put in place. And we also as well signpost our mentors to signpost the apprentices to our quality improvement champion programme. So when they're doing the dissertation, they can embed that within the trust, within the quality improvement championship programme. So we're like a conduit. I can't say that enough. We are perhaps a missing link, and we do that in our apprenticeship team so that the apprentice feels supported, but the mentor feels supported to support the apprentice. We have apprenticeship policies. They might ask about breaks in learning. We can support them with that, but we always allude them back to what was the commitment statement, but what is now, because the ESFA funding rules have changed, they now call it the training plan. So we get them to sign the training plan, but we as the apprenticeship team sign the apprenticeship plan, and we go back to that to say about the commitment and the hours, should they not be attending and things, and attending the review meetings and things, and the commitment of the time. But obviously if they leave the trust, we then, after us as a team, we help support find another apprenticeship mentor with that apprentice, and the network directors. We contact the network directors if we need to, and we act as that supporting gap if the apprentice is having any difficulties. So I think that answers your first question. Sorry.
And then some, Alison. No, that's brilliant. I think you've given us a really, really good list, and I've got some new ideas from that, actually, just listening to you. One thing that really spoke to me was that more strategic approach, that actually it sounds like the apprenticeship lead, we might think of the apprenticeship lead as to, notify whether there's a break in learning or a withdrawal, or get them set up on the DAS or any of that sort of last day of learning, and maybe celebrate success at the end. What you're saying there is actually you form this sort of, hub of knowledge, because you're doing many apprenticeships, managing many apprenticeships at many levels, and some of these challenges are common. But I love that what you said about your own organisation's quality improvement programme champions, that actually when it comes to the strategic business project or the dissertations that are part of an apprenticeship and the MSc programme, that actually seeing how they might intersect with that, and also getting the mentors involved in that. I think that's brilliant. And actually I'm going to ask you for some of those things you mentioned. You referenced the OTJ handout, the IFA KSBs. We'll include that with our resources that we send out after this. Loved what you said about coaching, because we take it for granted that people may know a little bit about mentoring, but they may know nothing about the program. But coaching, that power of asking the right questions, I think that's really powerful. You did say something about qualifications that intrigued me. I'd like to just a couple of minutes on that. So it struck me that mentors were coming to you and saying, do I have the right qualifications for this? So it sounded a little uncertain. Am I?
Yeah, so they were worried, I think, that they needed to have like some sort of formal qualification, and didn't actually take on board that they're already in a senior position, and that they've dealt with, obviously within their experience, that they've managed lots of different services over a long period of time, but they were doubtful because they were obviously supporting somebody who was on a master's program, and they not necessarily had a master's qualification in their own right. And so they're worried about that they were if they are the right person to do that. And again, we've asked questions in regards to their experience, how long they've been a manager. Are they at the senior level? We check that. We also check that, obviously, that they know the leadership and management style. So they've done some internal. So if they're considering it and they haven't, but they've been managing for a long time, we have internally like a mini boot camp for managers to come together. So we signpost them to that, to be able to obviously feel like what they've the theories around the management, because they've got the experience, but maybe some not so much the theory element around it. But it's not a formal qualification, but then that might lead them on to actually considering this themselves. But obviously we do know, and we would always vet that they don't go on it when they're obviously supporting an apprentice doing this in their own right.
No, that's really useful. I love the idea of the boot camp. And if I was going to set myself up for something like that, I'd certainly want to know what I would get myself involved with. A final question for you, and then we'll throw it open to the audience for questions for the panel. How are you, or how can you connect mentors with each other on programs? You do a lot of apprenticeships, not just with us, but with lots of different providers. How do you help them make those connections?
Yeah, like I said, we'd already started to put these forums of apprentice forums and with managers on the back of it, so it'd be a 3-hour like drop-in session, but it was for any apprenticeship coach or mentor to come to collectively to discuss. At the moment, because we were waiting for the other person in our team to join, so this is very much now, because she's joined us, starting, so we're getting to book them in and get the formalities, whether they want it face-to-face 1 month and then online a second month, because there is value with getting face-to-face. And we've asked them, like I said, of what particular topics they want us to go through first. But there is that added value of when, at the moment, what we're doing is we're touching base that even apprentices considering the programme, we put them in touch with another apprentice that's already on the programme or has completed it. But we also touch base. We ask in the first instance that anybody who's mentoring another person, can we put them in touch with another mentor? And they are already getting that peer support, but it's like that, how can we offer it wider in our trust? And that's the bit that we're wanting to do more of.
Nice. Yeah, and a key takeaway from what you said for me is about that fit. Yeah. We spend a lot of time looking at the applicants to make sure the program's the right fit for them and vice versa. What it sounds like you're saying is the same thing for mentors. It's got to be fit. And I think Helen said the same thing, and Carol alluded to the same. Right. I'm going to pause there, if that's okay. Thank you, all three of you, for your excellent contributions and insights. Now, with the help from Rosie and maybe some questions in the chat or any hands up that we have, can we put some questions to the panel? Let's have a look. Rosie, have you got a question coming up there?
Yes, we do have one from Dawn. So asking, where is the most accessible place for the mentor to review and get to grips with the KSBs?
Brilliant. Now, I think that came up, Helen, in your section, but I can't for the life of me remember what you said. Sorry, Helen.
So I think Alison's also said that she's going to signpost some to be able to access that. But there is, it's on Actem, on the skills radar. It has the list of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. There's lists on all the apprenticeship whoever the endpoint assessors are. So for us, that's ILM, and there's information on their websites. And when we send out the work-based mentor resource packs at the start, along with the webinar, there's a list of them there, and it also includes how they're assessed, because some of the KSBs are assessed through the portfolio and some are assessed through the strategic business proposal, which is really important to know, and not just to find out the day before you're submitting, which one of our learners did last week. But anyway, we won't name them.
Thank you for that, Helen.
But important actually for the work-based mentors as well, to be aware that the assessment by the ILM isn't an assessment by us. What we do is we say that they're ready to go through, but it isn't an assessment by us, it's an assessment by the ILM, and that's what the portfolio and the strategic business proposal are for at endpoint assessment time.
Okay, Dawn, is that give you the direction, the lead where you wanted to go?
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. We've always directed to the IFATE because obviously they're just listed there. I guess what I wanted to know is if you felt it was useful for them to be grouped in the modules that you actually deliver them in. So but I guess if it's on Aptum like that, then they can pick it up from there.
Yeah, and actually on our for PGA anyway, I'm sure that you'd have something similar for the PG DIP. We actually do have a list of the KSBs which they're covered, which unit they're covered in, which workshops they're covered in, and there's a spreadsheet with that on, and that's available. Again, it is available on Aptem, but your tutor would be able to signpost you to that. So that shows which ones we're covering and which unit as well.
That's tremendously helpful, thank you, because I think it just contextualizes it to put it with the unit rather than this mass list of KSBs.
Yeah.
So that's definitely helpful. Yeah. And just can I throw in another question there, Helen? Sorry.
Go on then. Go on, Dawn, you went first and you went on camera, so go for it.
Thank you. How easy is it for mentors to access Aptum?
Easy.
And
it's fine.
That's fine, is it?
So once you've got a login, it's fine. It does have its own little idiosyncrasies, which we could talk about at length, but no, it's easy to access, and the tripartite review meetings are generally what you will be accessing, what they will be accessing, and it's within each of those where you can update things around the knowledge, skills and behaviours, because as tutor and work-based mentor, we also assess the learners, so agree that they are at level 3 before they go through to the final gateway review. So once you're in it, and what we tend to do is we tend to put we ask people to be logged into Aptem for the TRMs, the tripartite review meetings, so that then we can all see this. I mean, I will share my screen, but it's nice to know that they are on it as well, and then they can be, and I can say, oh, you can put this bit in now, and you put the, make sure it's all up to date, as much as possible during the meeting. Not always possible, but as much as possible during the tripartite review meeting.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Alison, did you want to come in on that? I saw your hand up at one stage.
Yeah, I was just going to say, part of the review meeting, if they meet with the coach from the clinical, whatever the educator is from the university at the tripartite, usually what you'll find is that they will share the screen and go through that with them. And I do know, because obviously if the manager's dealing with many different apprenticeships, the problem what they might come against is that they use Aptum, or they use PebblePad, or they use OneFile, or they use what's the other system? I think I'm signed up to 6 systems currently. So to remember my username and password, Aptum sometimes for some universities has 2 different front face, but you can switch between the viewings. So it can be a minefield for mentors, I'm not going to lie. But again, that's that thing with your apprenticeship team. Do they get, because they're signing contracts and documents potentially through Aptum, so they can sometimes act again as a conduit between both parties and share the screen and show them where they might be able to find reviews. Because your apprenticeship team, I don't know whether all apprenticeship teams do, but I ask for them to see copies of them reviews to see if they're on track, and if they're falling behind, then ask why and what it is that we need to put in for additional support. So it's just to be mindful of that apprenticeship teams can sometimes support that.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Thank you.
Alison, you raise an excellent point, and we do have sort of some mixed feelings. In principle, it is very easy to get on there, but we're producing a couple of guides for employers and potentially for mentors to say, look, this is how you log in, this is where to go. So no, Dawn, thank you so much for two or three excellent questions. Your check's in the post. Would anybody else like to come in? Really useful answers. You've opened some doors for me that I didn't know about actually. So Rosie, do you want to take us to another question, please?
Yeah, so we've got a couple there in the chat. I don't know if Ilona was Iona or Ilona, I can't tell. Sorry if it's Iona.
It's Ilona.
Okay.
Anything close to that.
They look the same on my
fine.
screen, but yeah, Ilona. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so it was just if you had advice. So part of it, the course is obviously done on group work assessment. What I found with our learner is she's very keen to get the best mark possible. She's been sitting at distinction level. She, in both groups that she's been a part of now, have been left to pretty much do that work on her own. The first group, that was quite confrontational. There was definitely some comments made to her in that process that were not okay, and I know she's kind of flagged separately. The second group, I think, has just been very much like, well, we'll leave it all to the last minute, like we'll see what's left at the end, not necessarily doing the same level of reading. So her concern is obviously if she just does her amount, her mark is going to be quite drastically reduced by the fact that the other people in the group aren't doing as much. So just if there's any kind of advice, because obviously like, we want her to be able to do as much as possible, but I don't want her having that level of stress every time it comes to a group submission. But also, you know, we're a small organisation, you know, having, you know, more or less a week where she is out of the business trying to pick up 6 people's work to get the best mark possible on a course isn't something that's sustainable for the next kind of 18 months.
Well, listen, Ilona, first of all, thank you for your question, and heart goes out to your student there, your learner with us, who's having that experience. You know, I'm sure, hopefully, that learner is close enough to the team to be sharing their experience with them. So I'm keen to see who in the panel can come in on this with any advice, and also whether there is any sort of way we could tie in the mentor's role in some of this as well, so that the support is there, not necessarily specifically for this case, but just in more general terms. So does anybody want to come in on that? Anya, you want to come in on that?
Yes, I think, thank you very much for sharing this. It's obviously not a situation that we would wish for anybody to be in. It can be the dynamics of the group, obviously, but here I would say how important it is to have the close relationship to the tutor, to the practice-based tutor, to flag it up early, not to wait until the coming or upcoming progress review, but try to flag it up earlier. It is also important to have a good course rep and the possibility, or not the possibility only, but the trust that you can talk to somebody. You should not feel, or your learner should not feel alone and take it on her only because obviously she wants to achieve a great mark, and then that very quickly is picked up then by the group, or as you say, this sort of leaving it until the last moment because other people have different priorities and different approaches. As tutors or lecturers, we always want to enable this safe space and say, so what is not working, and then help to facilitate a discussion in a group and see where we can offer more support, because I think the worst possible thing is indeed to be left with it alone and feeling like there is no one to go to. So there is your tutor, there is your practice-based tutor, like Carol and Helen, and then there is your lecturer, the person who's delivering the class. Then there is your course rep, who can flag it up, say, more anonymously if that's needed, to give you a little bit of safe space. And then there is the work-based mentor who can also talk to us and say, look, this is not what we would expect because of the pressures. So Yes, I see, Alison, you have your hand up. I'm speaking from the tutor perspective.
I've got a question for is it Iona? It's just to
Yeah.
ask, do you have any previous prior learners that have gone through this already, the programme, or not?
So in a weird kind of way, in that my husband went through a previous version of the course, which is actually how we knew about it. So we're a small organisation that is then able to take advantage of the apprenticeship levy. So we're quite a different structure to the kind of normal organisation that would go through this. So there's nobody else within the organisation who's done it, but I've obviously seen it from seeing somebody else go through it as he was undertaking the course.
Right, because if I was having a learner that was trying to do all the work of all the group people that have done before, is giving that the support as well. I said go back to the course tutor and definitely do that if they've got that that relationship. And also, but I would also put in touch that learner with learners that have done the course previously, whether it's in this university or others, because they'll see then what actually work, the majority of the work that they need to do. So, and if you're struggling with that, what about your other alternative organisations that, like could Kieran or Anya put her in touch with people, other learners as like a learner rep? Because I know that I've got somebody that's just got her results back on the 12th of September, and she's emailed me because we have that reputable contact. She's got a distinction. She's absolutely buzzing. I know that she would potentially support others if you needed it. I would have to contact her first, but if she wanted, that learner wanted some support in regards to what the things she needs to focus on in regards to that group work, another learner rep would be, a real support for her, as well as the tutor. Useful.
I think it's also about enabling this open space when everybody can talk about expectations, and it's about facilitation and facilitating this discussion. Nobody should go through it alone and feel, oh, it's all on me, and I will do it because I care about my mark, because I want to progress and learn from it. So I would definitely, Alison, thank you so much also for bringing in the other side, someone who went through it. But again, in the course, that should be a discussion, informal, if you want, with the tutor, with the course tutor, with your practice-based tutor as well, in the review, in between the reviews, to say, I don't feel comfortable with that. Can someone help me? And we will step in and help.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be confrontational at all. It shouldn't be confrontational.
Ilona, how is that landing for you?
Yeah, really useful. I think I think the first time was like, maybe it's just, not a great group dynamic. Second time, I can now just see that because of the personality type that she is, it's easy to see that this situation could arise again. So yeah, good to know. Obviously something that we will flag up in separate meetings. But yeah, I think just to give her that confidence that it's something that she should be flagging with course tutors, lecturers, and that's kind of like the right approach, is really useful.
Wonderful. I'm going to bring Carolyn, before I do, just because this is a recorded session, obviously we're protecting the learner's identity here and confidentiality. Ilona, if you're happy, my team will contact you, reach out to you after this call, just to make sure that learner, we understand the details in an appropriate forum, and we can put her in touch with the right people. Is that okay? Carol?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Kieran, because I know who Ilona's speaking about. So let's catch up afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you.
But no, thank you for raising it. These things clearly do happen. It's part of the dynamic of working in any group. But thank you for raising it. Rosie, I think we've got time for a couple more questions. What have you got in the chat pane for us?
That's everything from the chat, actually. I've seen a couple coming through, but it was people who unfortunately had to leave a little bit early.
Okay. All right. Well, we're running a little bit ahead of time, but that's okay. What I'm going to do now, first of all, thank the panel once again for your excellent contributions. We will be providing some more resources for those of you who've joined today live, and those of you who are watching this on the recording. They will still be available after this event. For now, next up, I think we're going to bring us back to the wonderful, fabulous Education Skills Funding Agency, and their rule changes for this year. We have a great team here at the University of Manchester who keep an eye on these changes and help us interpret what they might mean for our recruitment practices, how we advertise, what does it mean to the programme, how we run the programme. So I'm going to bring in, thankfully today, a lady called Amara who works within that team, and she's just going to give a few headlines. Now, we're not really in a position to do Q&A because we can get into some serious small print with these things, but what we will do is provide you with both a copy of the slides and some further resources on what the changes are, and also contact to our email address for our compliance team, who cover all apprenticeship finance matters. So that's DAS, breaks in learning, transfers of employment, all that sort of stuff. So Amara, if you're comfortable, are you happy to take us through a bit of the headlines from the latest round of changes from the ESFA?
Yeah, I'll get started. That's all right. So just an introduction. So good morning, everyone. I'm Amara, and I'm part of the Apprenticeship Funding and Compliance team here at AMBS. So I'll be kind of introducing what kind of funding and compliance we do in terms of the funding rules from the Department for Education, which is the DFE. I'll give a bit of an introduction to the team, an overview of some key information that we would like you to know, and also some of the main updates in the new funding rules for this year, which is 2023-24. So firstly, if you go back a little bit, if that's all right, Rosie. Thank you. So just a quick intro to the team. So as I mentioned, we are the Apprenticeship Funding and Compliance team. So we're made up of 3 colleagues at the moment: Victoria Mansfield, who's Apprenticeship Funding and Compliance Manager, Vicky Matthews, who's our Apprenticeships Planning and Data Officer, and myself, and I am the Compliance Administrator. And just a quick note that you can always contact us at the email here, which is apprenticeship.finance@manchester.ac.uk for queries in regards to kind of finance and compliance. So, and I know some of you may have heard of us in regards to things like contracting, written agreements, or using the apprenticeship service. Next slide, please. So just to note that when these slides go out, we have got a list of acronyms here that will be mentioned. Again, I'll explain them and use the full terms during the slides, but I hope it's going to be useful to refer to if any do come up and you want to know what they are. So next slide, please. So next, I'll kind of look at the apprenticeship funding rules. Again, these are published by the Department for Education. So I won't be able to go through all of the rules because they'll be quite long and there's quite a lot of them. But what I will be doing is looking at kind of some of the main updates this year, or any key information in them that we would want to share with you. But if you do want to look at any of the full funding rules or have any needing more information on any of them, you can always access the gov.uk link here. It'll take you to the web page in the picture. So you can access previous funding year rules as well as the new ones. So in previous years, there were separate funding rules for employers and training providers. This has been updated this year, and so there's a single set of rules which applies to training providers and employers. This has all been condensed into one document rather than separate ones, so it should be easier for you to refer to any of the funding rules should you need them. The overall rule for, sorry, Rosie, go back, thank you. So in previous years, we've, the rules that were in place the year an apprentice originally started apply for that apprentice throughout their programme. So if an apprentice started in the previous funding year, those funding rules would apply for them throughout their programme. That is the overall rule of how the apprenticeship funding rules work. And just to note that you can download copies of the apprenticeship funding rules in PDF form. However, I would actually suggest referring to online versions just because sometimes there are minor updates throughout the year. So they have an annual big update and then smaller ones throughout the year sometimes, which are not always flagged. So it would be useful if you need to go back to the funding rules to refer to the online versions on the website. Next slide, please. So next I'll be talking about kind of eligibility and highlighting one update in the new rules to do with secondments during an apprenticeship. And the employer may agree with another organisation to second an apprentice for part of the apprenticeship. The overall kind of requirement for this is that an apprentice must spend at least 50% of their apprenticeship with the employer whose PAYE scheme that they are on. And as you can see in the picture below, there are some exceptions to this rule. The main one that we have found used in our apprenticeships is that the apprentice is part of the NHS workforce sharing agreement. Again, overall, they have to spend 50% with their employer, but there are some exceptions that you can find. Next slide, please. In the next little bit, I'm going to talk about kind of who can be a work-based mentor for apprentices. So a mentor must be a more senior, experienced member of staff, as mentioned by the panel before. Usually they can assess who would be the best person for that, but usually it must be someone more experienced or more senior to the apprentice. And someone cannot act as a mentor whilst undertaking the same apprenticeship themselves. So someone acting as a mentor to an apprentice cannot be on the same apprenticeship as the apprentice. They can, again, this doesn't rule out other apprenticeships, but in this particular case, it's for the apprenticeship that the apprentice is on. And overall, we suggest that mentors should be able to give apprentices relevant opportunities to develop and practice the skills that they learn on the programme, as well as help ensure that the apprentice is able to complete the necessary on-the-job training hours or OTJ hours for their programme. Next slide, please. So next, I'll talk a little bit about off-the-job training or OTJ. So again, I won't go into too much detail about how OTJ works and all the funding rules, because we can get in quite a detailed discussion about this. But again, there are resources available on the gov.uk website published by the Department for Education, and you can find other resources for other areas of the apprenticeship rules, again, in the same place. One thing to note again is that when the new apprenticeship funding rules get updated, these resources are updated separately, so they're not always updated in time. So you can refer to the dates on the documents to make sure it is for the appropriate year, or they are the most updated version of these resources. And the main update in the 2023-24 funding rules is that revision, where it's specifically required for the achievement of the apprenticeship, now counts towards OTJ hours. So in previous years, it wasn't considered active learning, and so it wasn't counted towards OTJ, but now it is now counted towards OTJ hours. Next slide, please. So the new funding rules have provided an update as what counts as active learning in the programme. So we'll have a quick look at this update. That's all right. So previously, providers were required to evidence that every apprentice engaged in active learning, for example, learning of knowledge, skills and behaviours, or KSBs, at least once every 4 weeks. This has now been updated, and it is required for providers to evidence that every apprentice engaged in active learning at least once in every calendar month. So this is an exception to the rule that apprentices followed the rules that the apprenticeship funding rules of the year they started. This now applies to all learners, both retrospectively and current learners. Yeah. So the next I'll talk about the requirements for progress reviews for work-based mentors or employers, academics and the apprentices. So this rule is current and has been in place, but progress reviews must take place at least 4 times a year, and they must be carried out at least every 12 weeks. If there are any changes to this rule, any changes to this 12-week rule, this must be agreed by the employer. If the employer is unable to attend, they must be given opportunity to contribute and must also be sent the relevant information after the meeting for review and signature. Previously, the requirements for progress reviews were quite strict, but now there's a little bit more flexibility if employers for unavoidable reasons can't make them. But again, this must be exception to the rule, and we ask that employers please try and attend as many of these as possible. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about information that's really important for us as a compliance team to have information for. And in this case, it's changes in circumstances. So learning providers must be informed of all changes in circumstance. Now, this looks like a big long list of changes in circumstances, so I'm not going to go into detail with all of them, but I've included this just to show the kind of range and depth of what kind of change in circumstances that can happen on programme, and that's really important for our team to be notified of. Again, this can be passed on to tutors if needed, and often is, but it's really important for our processes to go really smoothly and ensure that we're delivering in the most accurate and fair way, and the information we have for learners is really kind of kept up to date. So it's things like personal details, things like contact information, both for apprentices, for the organisations that they're from, and also for work-based mentors and line managers, so we can keep in contact with them and keep them updated. Also things like secondments, changes to working hours, because this can affect things like on-the-job training hours, and then big changes such as whether they're going on a break in learning or if there's any withdrawals. And yeah, that's all from me. I hope that was all okay, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Amara. I think you set a steep challenge, unravel and unpick the headlines from the ESFA funding rule changes, and we gave you 10 minutes to do it, and I think you've actually nailed it. So I'll offer it out there to the rest of the folks, both watching it live and on the recording. Please, if you've got any questions or queries, get in touch with the team. They're a fantastic team. They are as supportive as they are knowledgeable, extremely helpful, and we're there to try and make sure that back end is as right for the learner as the front end experience is as well. Okay, we're going to be sending out some further reading material around that topic because it's such a potentially intricate one, but you've got the resources to help there. A few closing remarks then, because we're coming up to finish a little bit earlier than originally planned, which is great. But can I invite you to, if you've got any key takeaways from today's session, be you a panel member or a member of the audience or a member of the university staff who's joined this call, please pop them in the chat now. We'll be going back through those to collate sort of what were the key takeaways that people had. I'm going to offer up a couple of mine. One was a critical one of that third perspective of a mentor. That's something that leapt out for me, that brilliant sort of like this third witness standing there surveying the scene. Another thing that sort of leapt out to me was this sort of question about boundaries, that sort of keeping things ring fenced for learners, but also the length and breadth of initiatives that Alison went through in terms of some of the different things that you can intervene. But the thing that's coming across to me the most strongly is that maybe mentors need almost as much support as the learners. So I think that's something that is coming through the conversations today for me. But if you have any other takeaways, please share them in the chat. Rosie, if we take us to that final slide, what I want to do, obviously, just to thank you, first of all, to thank my wonderful colleagues and panel here today. So thank you to Anya, to Alison, to Helen, and to Carol, and to Amara for your contributions today, to Rosie for organising this event. We're going to be doing another one hopefully in a few months' time. And with that in mind, whether you're watching this live or the recording, please you take a moment, click on the QR code or the embedded link there, and that'll take you to a really short survey. 8 questions. What did you like about the session? What did you not like about the session? And some topics for your perusal to think about. What would you like to talk about in the next employer forum? This is for you to drive the agenda. So we'll be sending that survey out widely to the people who couldn't join us today, but also to a larger pool of employers along with the resource pack. So unless there are any final comments from any of the other panel members.
Just to say thank you. I think this is what we needed. I know that we're talking to our employers on a daily basis without any breaks, and we take questions and we try to accommodate everything we can to support them. But it's such a, for me, important moment to see that we invite you and you come and you want to share, and the fact that we can share things, that we can tell you what we would like to do for you, and then you respond and you ask us to do things for you. I think this is such an important moment in the provision, and I wanted again to thank you for coming, all of you interested in work-based mentor roles and the support, but also to my team, because I'm not the only person who is passionate about what we're doing. We all are, and that shines through, and I'm really looking forward to the next forum. Thank you all from me.
Thank you, folks. Have yourself a very pleasant rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.